I'm not doing anything anymore. I'm going back to my parents for a week. I declared this firmly. They both stared at me in shock, but Thomas spoke first.
Hey, Donald. All right, we'll be free. This is awesome.
What?
No more nagging around here.
He said, directing the comment to Donald. I couldn't believe my ears. Even though I'd reached my limit, my husband had the nerve to say something like that. Then Donald added,
Yeah, that's perfect. Don't bother coming back.
He spat those words at me. Hearing that from Donald, not just Thomas, nearly brought me to tears. And so, I decided to start living at my parents' house from that day. That day, I didn't receive any messages from Thomas or Donald. I didn't go back home over the weekend, and about a week after moving in with my parents, I got a call from Thomas. That call marked the beginning of a change in the fate of the three of us as a family. My name is Jessica, and I'm a 40-year-old stay-at-home mom. I have a 10-year-old son named Donald. I work full-time at a bank while managing household chores and raising my child, putting in a lot of effort every day. My husband, Thomas, is 5 years younger than me. He's an only child and grew up surrounded by his parents. Currently, he works part-time as a construction worker for a local company. We may not be wealthy, but the three of us live modestly and comfortably. I met Thomas through what you might call a pickup. He came to the bank where I work and, apparently struck by love at first sight, approached me persistently.
Just one date, please.
Thomas said this boldly at the counter, and at first I was taken aback. But since it was a small-town branch, there were either no customers or only elderly ones. Everyone watched Thomas's enthusiasm warmly, leaving me unsure how to respond.
If he's really bothering you, would you like me to talk to him?
No, I'm sure he'll lose interest soon. I can handle it myself. The branch manager kindly offered to step in, but I decided to handle it on my own. Even after I declined, Thomas didn't give up, and in the end, his persistence won me over, and I agreed to one meal. During that dinner, we had great conversation, and I saw a sweet, genuine side of Thomas.
Getting to have dinner with you, Jessica, is seriously amazing. But I'm sorry I could only take you here. Next time, I'll find a nicer place.
Seeing how happy he was stirred something maternal in me. I had planned to tell him not to come back to the bank, but with his sincerity, I couldn't be harsh, and eventually we went on a few more dates. Over time, I found myself growing fond of Thomas, and we started dating seriously. Honestly, with a 5-year age gap, I hadn't initially thought about marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling he might just be playing around, and I figured he'd lose interest if a younger, prettier girl came along. But Thomas was truly smitten with me. He started mentioning marriage, introducing me to his mom and friends, and through these gestures, I realized how serious he was about our relationship. Thomas's dad had passed away from illness a few years ago, so I never had the chance to meet him. But his mom, Janet, was incredibly welcoming toward me, and I gradually began to think about our marriage. When I was 28 and Thomas was 23, we submitted our marriage license on the 2nd anniversary of our relationship.
I'm sure my husband in heaven would be thrilled too. Be happy together.
Thank you. I look forward to being part of your family. Janet was fully supportive of our marriage, and I felt confident that we could have a good relationship.
To think I get to be with you every day, Jessica. I'm the luckiest guy.
Even after marriage, Thomas remained head over heels for me, and I felt truly happy. My parents had some concerns about Thomas's job and the age difference, but I genuinely believed that love could overcome those issues. Ignoring their worries, we continued to enjoy our time together, and a year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. Thomas was overjoyed.
If it's a boy, I want to play catch with him.
Thomas was excited even before we knew the baby's gender. However, my first pregnancy was more complicated than I expected, and I suffered from morning sickness right from the start. It was tough to eat, and when I did, I would often get sick afterward. I managed daily life with frequent doctor visits and 4 treatments, but I was sometimes late to work or had to take days off when I just couldn't function. At first, Thomas was concerned, but eventually he started offering me misguided advice.
Morning sickness is just for now. Try to enjoy it.
When he made comments that seemed to downplay my discomfort, I was irritated, but that was only the beginning. After a while, Thomas spoke to his mom, Janet, about my morning sickness and came back with an outrageous suggestion.
Mom said morning sickness is just in your head.
In my head? That can't be true.
Well, she said, if you're struggling this much now, there's no way you'll handle childbirth or raising a kid. Maybe we should reset things and save up some money first.
I was shocked and asked him to clarify. Reset? What do you mean?
Well, there's still time, right? You could, not go through with it.
Thomas didn't explicitly say it, but I understood what he meant. I was fighting every day to protect the baby inside me despite my constant nausea, and seeing Thomas taking advice from Janet as if she hadn't experienced pregnancy herself brought me to tears. Don't say something so foolish. Thomas looked a little irritated at my anger.
I'm only worried about you. Every day, you look miserable. Have you thought about how hard that is for me to watch?
I was stunned. Pretending to care, he was really just thinking of himself. If that's the case, why don't you go stay at your mom's? That way you won't have to look at my miserable face. Thomas kept his sullen expression, said nothing, and left the house. He probably did go back to his parents' place. My morning sickness didn't ease even in the later stages of pregnancy and lasted until I gave birth. During that time, Thomas stayed mostly with his parents. Occasionally, he'd come home, see how unwell I looked, sigh, and head back to his mom's.
Stop pretending to throw up just to get my attention. Mom said it's weird to still have morning sickness this late. You're lying, aren't you?
As my due date approached, Thomas began verbally attacking me. If this were just an act, how much easier it would be. With that thought, I resolved that this would be my last pregnancy. The challenges didn't end with pregnancy. My labor was a long and difficult ordeal that eventually required a C-section.
Just let me know when the baby's born.
Even as I was struggling with labor pains, Thomas said this and didn't come to the hospital. I'm not going to bother telling him once the baby's here. That was my thought, but then I needed Thomas's signature when it was time to switch to a C-section, so I reluctantly called him.
It would have been easier if you'd just done a C-section from the start. Then we'd know exactly when he'd be born.
He made that comment, signed the form, and left without any further support. Yet he got to hold Donald before I did. I'll never forget that. The pregnancy and birth were hard, but once Donald was born, the morning sickness disappeared, and I finally felt some relief. Donald, the child I went through so much to bring into the world and decided would be my only one, was incredibly precious to me. While I was in the hospital, I worked on recovering my health and learning how to care for a newborn. And as planned, both Donald and I were discharged together. Thomas came to the hospital a few times, but only to hold Donald and then leave. He didn't bother helping with things like my laundry. Then, on the day we were discharged, he nonchalantly returned home. And of course, Janet came along too.
Aren't you adorable? Donald, Grandma's here.
The moment I got home, Janet was completely focused on Donald. She didn't offer a single word of encouragement for me. Instead, while holding Donald, she started giving me orders.
Jessica, now that you're back, go do Thomas's laundry and then run to the store. I'll watch Donald for you.
I barely had a moment to relax after being discharged. My parents' house is an hour's drive away. Because of that, it's a bit difficult for them to come help me every day. I had hoped that maybe Janet had come to help because of that, but she quickly proved otherwise. Since that day, Janet came over nearly every day.
Hurry up and start cooking, or Thomas will be home soon.
Janet would take Donald from me and order me to do chores. I couldn't find any peace this way. Of course, I talked to Thomas about it. I appreciate Janet coming over to help with Donald, but it's a lot every day, and I'd like to manage on my own, so could she come less often? I tried to choose my words carefully to avoid offending anyone, but Thomas frowned.
After she's been nice enough to come, you say something like that?
I'm grateful, but
She wants to help with her first grandchild. You should just put up with it.
his response made me raise my voice without thinking. Why? I went through so much to bring him into the world. Why should I, as his mother, have to just put up with it?
What's with that attitude? Just because you're the mother, you think you're so important?
I'm not saying who's more important. Thomas raised his voice as well. I didn't feel like I'd said anything wrong. We glared at each other until Donald, who had been asleep, started crying. The sound snapped me back to reality, but Thomas glanced at Donald and then spoke.
Look, he's crying. You wanted to be the mother, right? Go ahead and take care of him as much as you like.
His snide tone irritated me, but I didn't have time to deal with him. I picked Donald up and calmed him down. But despite that heated argument, Thomas didn't seem to convey my concerns to Janet, who showed up the next day and the day after, as if nothing had happened. I knew it would be awkward if I brought it up directly, but I couldn't rely on Thomas. So reluctantly, I spoke up myself. Janet, I really appreciate you coming to help me, but it's hard for me when you come every day. I'd like to spend more time with Donald myself, so could you step back a little? Janet's face turned red at my request.
Are you complaining to your mother-in-law?
It's not a complaint. I'm grateful for how much you love Donald.
But you want me out of the way, don't you?
Why are these two so defensive? I struggled to find the right words, feeling completely at a loss. But it seemed Janet was thoroughly upset.
If you want me gone so badly, then I'll leave.
With that, Janet stormed out of the house. I was relieved that she left, but honestly, it left a bad taste in my mouth. Thomas would likely hear about it and start giving me grief too. Even so, I don't regret it. I tried talking to Thomas, but he didn't get the message. I was careful with my words with Janet, but I knew I had to say at least that much or she'd never have left. Sure enough, that evening, Thomas came home with a furious look on his face. Welcome home.
What did you say to my mom?
He stomped into the living room without a greeting and started yelling at me.
My mom called me in tears.
I just told her what I'd already said to you, since you didn't relay the message.
Are you crazy? Mother-in-law issues can get out of control.
If you know that, why didn't you step in? With a big sigh, I responded, I get it. That's why I asked you to handle it before I talked to her directly.
So now you're blaming me?
They really are two of a kind. He doesn't think he's at fault, yet he makes me feel like I should take the blame. I don't feel that I did anything wrong, but his phrasing was infuriating. That's not what I'm saying, but if you'd been a little more supportive of my feelings.
There it is. You're blaming me. Enough. You need to cool off and call my mom to apologize. If you can't do that, then I won't be coming back.
I was stunned. With that, Thomas left the house again. I knew exactly where he'd gone. He was back at his parents' place. I wanted to leave it alone, but I'm currently on maternity leave, and my benefits won't come in for a while. I'd already spent a good portion of our savings on delivery and medical bills, and to manage day-to-day expenses, we need Thomas's income. It would be difficult if Thomas stayed away for too long. Reluctantly, I picked up the phone and called Janet. I apologized for saying something inconsiderate this afternoon.
So you realized you were out of line, but it's too late. I won't be helping you anymore.
Janet's response left me a bit stunned, realizing she had truly believed she was helping. Still, I humbled myself. I'll do my best to manage on my own. If there's ever a time when I really can't handle it, I'll ask for your help. You're the only one I can rely on, Janet.
Well, you finally get it. Go ahead and try.
I didn't actually want her to come, but I said it anyway, feeling it was necessary to keep things peaceful. After that, Thomas was satisfied that I had apologized to Janet, and he came back home. I managed without her help, and I enjoyed raising Donald freely. Janet seemed to wait for a call from me asking for help, but as no call came, she started showing up again, uninvited. I was annoyed, but since it wasn't as frequent as when Donald was a newborn, I chose to ignore it to avoid more complications. Janet's frequent visits weren't entirely without benefit. By the time I returned to work, Donald had grown fond of Janet, and she would take care of him after daycare. Donald wasn't very strong and often had fevers, and on rare occasions when I couldn't go to him right away, I would rely on Janet. Of course, those instances were few. Ideally, Thomas, with his flexible hours, would handle this, but he'd often take Donald to Janet's house instead and stay there until I finished work. He wasn't actually caring for Donald himself, and since he was so dependent on Janet, I couldn't expect much from Thomas as a parent. Honestly, I wasn't sure if Thomas even understood what it meant to be a parent. Still, despite everything, Donald grew up well. Janet doted on him excessively, giving him too many treats and never saying no, spoiling him in every way. I was concerned about this, but since I relied on her for care, I couldn't be too firm. I had hoped Thomas might handle some of Donald's discipline in my absence, but he spoiled Donald just as much. Though I was glad to see Donald growing strong, I began worrying about his weight and increasingly demanding behavior. Once Donald started elementary school and joined an after-school program, his visits to Janet's house gradually decreased. My work hours were still late as always, but Donald would leave the after-school program around 6 p.m. and wait for me at home.
The after-school teacher doesn't give us snacks unless we finish our homework. I want to quit and go to Grandma's house instead.
Donald had some complaints about the after-school program, but honestly, I was relieved to have some distance from Janet. If Donald had kept going to her place, he would likely have just kept gaining weight.
And the snacks there aren't enough.
That's not true. Besides, you eat snacks after you get home before dinner, don't you? You're eating more than most people.
But I get hungry.
I can understand where Donald is coming from. After spending a full day at school studying and being active, it's natural for him to be hungry. That's why I always prepared something for him to have before dinner. That's why I put a sandwich in the fridge for you every morning.
I don't want a sandwich. I want snacks.
But Donald ignored the sandwich I prepared and only wanted junk food. By the way, I wasn't the one providing that junk food. Thomas would bring it home from work, or Janet would drop off big bags of it, saying it was a treat. I was worried that if Donald kept gaining weight, it might affect his health. When I tried to make healthier meals to help him slim down a bit, Thomas would complain.
I do physical work, and I can't move properly with this kind of food.
Seeing Thomas complain, Donald started doing the same to me. I thought about quitting my job to focus on parenting, but if I did, we'd likely hit financial limits pretty quickly. In this difficult situation, I did my best with what I could. But when Donald turned 10, I finally reached my emotional breaking point. Hi, sorry I'm late. One evening, as I came back from work, I heard the sound of the TV along with Thomas and Donald's voices. There were no words to greet me, just the sound of them laughing at the TV. It was almost 8 p.m., yet there were snack wrappers scattered everywhere, and Donald's school bag was left lying around. Neither of them seemed to have taken a shower. I couldn't help but sigh. Donald, put away your school bag. And Thomas, could you at least remind Donald to do that?
Geez, you finally get home, and you're already nagging.
What about dinner? What happened with that? When I knew I'd be late, I usually prepared dinner before heading to work. But that day, I had to stay late unexpectedly, so I'd let them know to eat something on their own.
We haven't eaten yet.
What? I told you to eat something. Donald has school tomorrow, you know?
Then I can skip. I don't even want to go because I have math tomorrow.
Donald chimed in from the couch, watching TV without a care.
Yeah, skip it. Once you're an adult, you can't just take days off, so do it while you can.
What are you talking about? I'm not letting him skip without a good reason. Enough of this nonsense. Both of you, go take a shower. Donald glared at me with a look just like Thomas's. By now, I was used to that attitude. While you're in the shower, I'll make something, and when you're done, get ready for tomorrow. Donald didn't respond or move, just stared at the TV. Thomas looked at me and scoffed.
Don't take it out on us just because you got home late.
Then they both went back to laughing at the TV. Seeing the two of them like that, I felt as if something inside me finally snapped. For almost 10 years, I'd supported both Donald, who'd always had health issues, and Thomas, who worked part-time and didn't earn much. But to them, everything I did was just taken for granted. Despite being family, neither of them showed any sense of helping each other. I stopped preparing dinner and turned to them. Fine, I'm taking a break too.
What?
Donald and Thomas finally looked at me, hearing my words. I'm not doing anything anymore. I'm going back to my parents for a week. I declared this firmly. They both stared at me in shock, but Thomas spoke first.
All right, we'll be free. This is awesome.
What?
No more nagging around here.
he said, directing the comment to Donald. I couldn't believe my ears. Even though I'd reached my limit, my husband had the nerve to say something like that. Then Donald added,
Yeah, that's perfect. Don't bother coming back.
He spat those words at me. Hearing that from Donald, not just Thomas, nearly brought me to tears. Without saying a word, I left the living room, went to my bedroom, and quickly packed. Then I walked out of the house, truly heading to my parents' place. I returned to my parents' house an hour away by car, crying, and they greeted me with wide eyes.
What happened? Tell us.
It felt shameful to cry in front of my parents as an adult. I knew I was being an ungrateful daughter by making them worry, but I just couldn't hold it in. Until now, I'd never complained to my parents about Thomas or Donald, nor shown any sign of weakness. I wanted to avoid worrying them since they didn't live close enough to drop by easily.
I see. That must have been so hard. I thought Thomas was helping you.
My mom said, covering her tear-filled eyes. My dad listened quietly and murmured,
We love Donald too. He's our grandson, and he's precious. But you are what's most important. If you're getting hurt, sometimes it's necessary to distance yourself.
I felt relieved to be accepted by them. And so from that day on, I began staying at my parents' house. That night, neither Thomas nor Donald reached out. The next day, I started commuting to the bank from my parents' place. The commute was a bit longer than before, but it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I felt more at ease than when I'd rush out of the house only to come home to more chaos. I didn't go back home even on weekends, and about a week had passed since I started staying at my parents' house. I received a call from Thomas.
When are you planning on ending this little runaway stunt? Just come home already.
That was the first thing he said when I picked up. I answered him as if it were obvious. What? I'm not coming back. Isn't it perfect for you to have me gone?
Are you joking?
Who's the one joking? You only want me back because it's inconvenient not having a maid around, right? Thomas fell silent at my words. I added, And did you see the signed divorce papers I left in the bedroom? Have you submitted them? I couldn't see him, but I could imagine Thomas fuming with anger. Yes, I had left completed divorce papers in the bedroom before I left. I thought that, seeing them, Thomas might finally understand that I'd reached my limit, but not even a single message came. He probably didn't even consider my feelings. Or are you just ignoring it? Are you so selfish that you won't even discuss it?
Enough with the accusations. You really think you can just demand a divorce? I haven't done anything wrong. No cheating, no debt. There's no reason for you to leave me.
I was stunned by Thomas's words. He was only kind in the past. For quite a while now, he hasn't even realized that he's turned into a verbally abusive husband. There is a reason for divorce, Thomas. If you won't agree, I'm ready to take this to court. Finally sensing my seriousness, he panicked and tried to use Donald as a shield.
Forget about me. What about Donald? You leaving home is child abandonment. Donald needs his mom.
He was yelling so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Using such strong words, he was clearly trying to play on my sense of responsibility, but I wasn't falling for it. How is it abandonment? You're his dad and are right there with him. It's not like I disappeared. I told you I was going to my parents' place.
Well,
And besides, it seemed like Donald was happier with you, didn't it? I wouldn't just leave him alone and walk out. It was a logical argument he couldn't refute. Thomas lowered his voice a bit.
Even so,
He probably didn't have anything left to counter me. Knowing this, I decided to push further. Or are you saying you're incapable as a father? Like it makes no difference if you're there or not? If so, then I really feel sorry for Donald. Keeping calm was the key here. Thomas had lost every bit of his composure and was fuming at every one of my words, which was oddly satisfying.
we're fine without you. I only called to make it easier for you to come back if you wanted. Fine, go ahead and file for divorce if that's what you want.
A smirk spread on my face. Thomas had finally said exactly what I wanted to hear. Well, thank you. I'll come by to pick up my things.
Wait,
Goodbye. I hung up smiling. By now, I could imagine Thomas regretting his words and feeling utterly lost. That Sunday, I headed to our house. I had only brought the bare essentials to my parents' place, so as I told Thomas, I went back to pick up my things. Oh my God, what's that smell? As soon as I stepped inside, a terrible odor hit me, and I froze at the entrance. Donald, are you here? I took a deep breath and entered, only to find Donald playing video games and snacking. But more shocking was the state of the room. Snack wrappers were scattered everywhere, and takeout containers were left untouched. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, and there were 3 overflowing garbage bags piled up in the corner of the kitchen. The scene made me feel dizzy. Donald, where's your dad?
Oh, you're finally back. Can you hurry up and clean? There are flies in here.
Donald said this, waving his hand in the air as if to swat away invisible flies. Well, in this mess, it's no wonder bugs are showing up. I am not back. I started walking toward Donald but stumbled on something hard. Your school bag? As soon as I looked down, I spotted Donald's school bag buried under the trash and laundry. It was in the exact same spot where it had been the day I left. Donald, you have been going to school, right?
No, Dad's been calling in my absences.
What?
Geez, you're so loud.
Donald glanced at me, annoyed, then went back to his video game.
He told me he was going to work and to just do whatever. So it's not my fault.
Apparently, Thomas couldn't handle getting Donald up in the morning, feeding him, or getting him to school. And he dared to call me neglectful? I sighed deeply. I used to think that, with my busy work schedule, I was just nagging Donald and not doing enough for him. But this past week had shown me just how much he needed me in his life. I was foolish to think he'd be okay with his dad. With a father like that, he's better off without him. Anyway, turn off the game and go take a shower. You smell terrible.
It's such a hassle.
Enough. Go now. I raised my voice, and Donald reluctantly headed to the bathroom. In the meantime, I headed to the bedroom. It was to pack our belongings. The divorce papers were still in the spot where I had left them. The signature was scrawled, but it was clearly Thomas's handwriting. I carefully placed the signed papers in my bag and began packing clothes for both Donald and myself into a large suitcase. I hadn't asked Donald where Thomas was, but he was probably at Janet's house. I figured he was getting meals from her, just for himself. When Donald finished his shower, I took him and left the house.
Where are we going? This is such a hassle.
Donald grumbled, but he got into the car as I held his hand. We drove straight back to my parents' house.
Hey, this is Grandpa and Grandma's place. Why did you bring me here?
We're going to live here from now on.
What? Out in the middle of nowhere? You've got to be kidding me.
Donald looked shocked and started shouting. Hearing his voice, my parents came rushing out of the house.
Donald,
My parents hadn't expected me to return with Donald. They briefly frowned at the sight of him, but their usual warm expressions quickly returned, and they welcomed us with open arms.
We're glad you're here. Come on inside.
I was sure they understood what I was trying to do without me having to explain. Donald glared at me, but followed my mom's prompt to enter the house. I could already tell this was going to be challenging. But this was our last chance to rebuild our relationship as mother and son. Leaving Donald with my parents, I went to file the divorce papers. They told me it would be processed by Monday. Already, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. That Monday, I confirmed that the divorce had been finalized and let my workplace know about the situation. In the afternoon, I took time off to complete the paperwork for Donald's school transfer. I also canceled the utility bills and rent on the apartment, which had been paid from my account, and officially started our new life at my parents' house. Donald, this is a fresh start for you too. You'll work on your studies and get some exercise. Not just play video games, and we'll work on a diet plan too. Donald listened quietly to my explanation. He glared at me with his usual defiant look. But I didn't look away. Look, I admit I was partly to blame. I was busy with work and stressed out, so I understand if you found me annoying. But Donald, you're my one and only precious treasure. I want us to start over here together. Seeing my tears, Donald's expression softened slightly.
Don't cry, Mom. I messed up too.
I'm sorry about the sudden transfer. I know you didn't get to say goodbye to your friends.
That's okay. I'm still connected with my close friends through games. Don't worry about it, Mom.
Hearing those kind words from Donald made me cry even more. The thought of possibly divorcing without this incident and being separated from Donald sent a chill down my spine. It was only about a week this time, but even in that short period, I had overestimated Thomas as a father and allowed Donald to live in such an environment. I'm sure I'll never forgive myself for that. Thank you. I hugged Donald.
Knock it off.
Donald said, trying to push me away, but his face wasn't its usual scowl. It was smiling. That night, I got a call from Thomas.
Jessica, Donald's missing.
I left the house with Donald on Sunday. Now it's Monday night. Honestly, I'd expected him to call yesterday, so the fact that he was only calling now confirmed he hadn't been home.
He doesn't go to friends' houses, doesn't have his games. Maybe he ran away.
He sounded genuinely worried, but I was too exasperated to respond.
Maybe he's trying to stop us from divorcing with all this talk of separation. Hey, you took the divorce papers, didn't you? Just toss them out.
I couldn't help but laugh. It seems he noticed that I came back, took my belongings, and left with the divorce papers. However, he hasn't realized that Donald's things, aside from his games, are also gone, and he doesn't suspect that I took Donald with me. Throw them out? I already submitted them.
What?
Thomas sounded shocked, shouting in disbelief.
No way. That can't be.
He began mumbling incoherently.
Are you at your parents' place? Let's talk this through.
Talk? About what now?
I'm coming over.
And with that, he hung up. He doesn't even know Donald is with me and hasn't bothered to search for him. As usual, he only thinks of himself. About an hour later, Thomas arrived at my parents' house. I had asked Donald to stay in another room with my dad.
Thomas, please come in.
My mom led him into the living room and quietly excused herself. Thomas entered the house looking a bit uncomfortable, then sat down across from me and spoke.
Jessica, come back and let's start over.
What?
Donald ran off because of our issues. Let's put this aside and go find him together.
Thomas's words didn't make any sense. Donald had initially sided with Thomas to push me out. So the idea that he disappeared because of our issues was completely illogical. It was obvious that Thomas's words were purely driven by his own selfish desire to get me back home. If you're really that worried about Donald, wouldn't you have started searching before coming here?
But we need to show him that we made up first.
How exactly are we supposed to show him that if he's not even here? I couldn't help but laugh. Thomas's face turned bright red.
Don't you care about Donald?
Don't you? In the week I was gone, you didn't leave him alone at home and spend your time at your mom's, did you?
How did you know?
Thomas flinched at my sharp tone. As I suspected, my assumptions were correct. While he'd occasionally gone back to check on Donald or bring him food, he'd mostly been at Janet's house, enjoying her meals and comfort. I know you care about Donald, but just spoiling him isn't enough. I'd said this many times before, but this was the first time I'd said it so seriously. Thomas had been spoiling Donald all along. In the end, that coddling had done nothing for Donald. He had once been such a sweet child, but Thomas's influence had turned him into a kid who openly defied me. That realization hurt so much that I couldn't hold back my tears. Thomas looked alarmed seeing me cry.
Anyway, let's go find Donald.
Wait, did you call me?
Just then, Donald poked his head into the living room.
Donald,
Thomas jumped up, his eyes wide.
you were here? No wonder Jessica wasn't worried. All right, let's go home.
What?
Donald looked confused.
Aren't you two divorced? I'm transferring to a new school, so I'm not going back.
You're okay with us being divorced?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Mom's been struggling for a while, and I realized over the last week that I really need her.
I was surprised by his words. Donald had noticed how hard things had been for me.
Looking back, that week without Mom was like being in hell. I promised her that I'd start fresh here.
Thomas collapsed to his knees. He never imagined that even Donald would reject him. Serves him right. I wiped my tears and managed a slight smile. So that's how it is. I've already canceled the utilities that were billed to my account, so you'll need to make arrangements yourself. Don't forget to clean up too. If the landlord sees that mess, you'll be kicked out.
Wait, please.
Thomas said, looking at me desperately, his face pale.
I can't handle it. I've never paid rent or utilities, and I don't know how to handle housework either. So, can't you just do things like you used to?
That's right. Whether I was late from work or feeling unwell, you never did a thing. I said, cutting off Thomas's words. And I doubt you'll start now.
That's not true. I'll change, I promise. Donald and I can both start fresh.
Are you kidding? Donald will always be my son, but you're a stranger to me now. I don't care. He wanted to patch things up, but I wasn't interested.
What? A stranger?
Seeing me reject every plea Thomas finally seemed to realize he couldn't undo this. He began to tremble. I'd never seen an adult tremble like that before, and it showed just how much he was shaken. But I'd endured far more hurtful words, bearing the burden of keeping the family together financially and emotionally.
Please, give me a chance to make it right. I'll change my ways this time.
Thomas, now on his knees, started to cry. But even if he were a child, I couldn't believe that someone who couldn't support me during my hardest times, like when I was pregnant, could change now. Sorry, but no. I rejected him firmly. No amount of tears could make me want to forgive him after all we'd been through. In the end, Thomas had no choice but to leave. Not long after, I got a call from Janet, likely after she'd heard what happened.
Jessica and this family have nothing more to do with you. Please, don't interfere with Donald anymore.
But my mom said one last thing. Mothers really are dependable. It made me realize that I need to be that kind of support for Donald too. Donald started at his new school and seemed to be enjoying it. He also began jogging with my dad after school.
This is torture. I'd rather stay chubby than do this.
He complains now and then, but he still goes jogging every day except when it rains, and he's gradually getting stronger and leaner. Well, it's your own fault for eating whatever you wanted. Think of it as working for your future self. For once, he didn't argue with me. After all the harsh words and cold treatment I endured, I wondered if this was Donald's way of making amends with me. Eventually, Thomas couldn't manage the rent or utilities and was evicted. He ended up back at Janet's house, but it seems he was so shaken by the divorce that he fell into a depression and couldn't even go to work.
Can't I skip the child support payments?
He had the nerve to make such a request, but I didn't agree to it. Child support is the one responsibility you have as a father. I'm not asking for a large amount. Show at least that much commitment. If you truly can't manage it, then consider your relationship with Donald to be over. Thomas was shocked, but he must have realized he had no choice. So he pleaded with Janet to cover the payments from his dad's inheritance until he could manage on his own. It's likely making him feel even more dependent and small, but that's none of my concern. If Janet had been a more supportive influence, things might not have turned out this way. I think this is also a consequence for her. Apparently, Janet has grown tired of Thomas's situation as well.
You're still young. You should find a nice young wife and move out soon.
She's been saying around the neighborhood, according to a friend who lives nearby. I honestly can't understand why she thinks an unemployed Thomas would find a new, younger wife. It just shows how self-centered that family has always been. Now I'm living at my parents' house with their support. I adjusted my work schedule and took a general staff position so I can spend more time with Donald. The pay is lower, but time with Donald is what matters most to me now. Donald has also started to change. He's taken the initiative to help me and my mom and spends less time gaming, learning chess from my dad instead. What kids need isn't just indulgent love. Remembering that, I'm committed to becoming an even better mom from here on.